Me Bend Your Ear podcast. My name is Frank. I'm the host of the show, and welcome. Today, I am very excited to discuss the new film, The Tragedy of Macbeth, starring Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand, which is an adaptation, of course, of the Shakespeare play. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we get to the review, as always, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Again, this is the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. My name is Frank. I'm the host of the show. This is a movie podcast where I discuss and review movies new and old. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. It is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Podbean, and Amazon Music. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube, which is Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. You can also watch it on the show's Facebook page, which is Let Me Bend Your Ear. The show is also available to watch on Twitter. The handle there is at Bend Your Ear Pod. And if you're watching live as I record, you can also watch it on Twitch. That is available there. The handle is also at Bend Your Ear Pod. Now, of course, if you want to download episodes at your convenience at any time, if you do not use a podcasting app, you can always go to the website. The website for the show is letmebendyourear.com. Every episode is available there to download, to listen to at your leisure. I would ask a couple of things. If you are a regular listener to the show, again, thank you for being a listener. I really appreciate it. If you want to help the show get a bigger audience, whatever podcasting app you use to listen to it, if you can rate and review, 5 stars, hopefully, if you enjoyed the show. If you can give it a rate and review, that would be extremely helpful. The more ratings and reviews that a show receives on any particular podcasting platform, the higher it goes in search results. So if you could do that, I'd appreciate it. The other thing I would ask, if you see me on social media, I usually am on Twitter a lot, and I interact there a lot. If you can like and share my posts regarding new episodes or even previous episodes, I'd appreciate that as well. That's another quick and easy way you can help an independent podcaster like myself obtain a bigger audience, because obviously that's always the goal. So if you could do that, I really appreciate it. If you want to email the show email is bendyourEarPodcast@gmail.com. And if you can like the Facebook page, that would be great. And if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, I would appreciate that as well. All right. So today I'm going to be discussing and reviewing The Tragedy of Macbeth. So this movie is unique in kind of a lot of ways, even though it is a Shakespearean adaptation of Macbeth. So obviously that part of it's not new. But what's kind of unique about this particular film is it's written and directed by Joel Coen. So obviously, if you are a film buff, you know that name. He is one half of the Coen brothers filmmaking duo. So as far as I'm concerned, the Coen brothers are some of the most innovative, creative filmmakers in the history of film. As far as my personal take on their movies, I'm a big fan of their earlier work. To be completely transparent, I haven't seen a lot of their later work. I think the last film I've seen of theirs, it recently would have been No Country for Old Men, which is, again, 11, 12 years old. But I am a big fan, especially of their first 3 films, which was Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing, which I have reviewed Miller's Crossing on episode 31 of this podcast. So if you want to go back to that, that is one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies. It's probably up there. The 2 favorite Coen Brothers movies that I love is Fargo and Miller's Crossing. So that's 1 and 1A. Now, again, Barton Fink is great. Raising Arizona is great. And I'll get to those reviews in the podcast at some point in the future. I'll get deeper into the Coen brothers. But again, this is the first time that one of the brothers has directed a film by himself. So Joel Coen actually directed The Tragedy of Macbeth on his own. He wrote and directed this adaptation of the Shakespeare play. So that's very unique in as well. And stars Denzel Washington. And I'm going to get to the cast in a minute. Denzel Washington, obviously a trained theater actor. He's done a lot of theater. Obviously, he wrote and directed the adaptation of Fences, which is a play from back in the 80s, where, if I remember, I didn't see the play, but I know James Earl Jones played the Denzel Washington part back in the 80s in the Broadway version of Fences. So obviously he's very familiar with the theater. I've seen him actually in another Shakespeare adaptation, which is Much Ado About Nothing, that came out in the 90s. That was directed by Kenneth Branagh. So I've seen him do Shakespeare before. And then Frances McDormand plays Lady Macbeth. Obviously, you know her. She just won an Oscar for Nomadland. Of course, Fargo, which I just mentioned, which she won another Academy Award, which is probably my favorite performance of hers anyway, other than Almost Famous, where she plays the main character's mom. She's great in that movie. It's a smaller role, but she's great in there as well. She's always really good. So the cast I want to get into, because obviously with a Shakespeare play, there's a lot of people in a lot of these plays, so I'm going to give them their due. So obviously you have Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. You have Alex Hassel as Ross, Bertie Carvel as Banquo, excuse me, Corey Hawkins as Macduff, Henry Mellon as Malcolm. And it was funny, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, God, he looks familiar. Malcolm looks familiar. And then I remembered he is from Harry Potter. He was heavier when he was in the movie, the brother that tortured Harry Potter. But he's in this film as well, and I could tell by his face he's fantastic. You have Catherine Hunter as the witches, you have Brendan Gleeson as King Duncan, Miles Anderson as Lennox, and Moses Ingram as Lady Macduff. Stephen Root, who's always great, he's in this movie literally for 5 minutes, and of course is hilarious, and just, he's just great in whatever he does. So, like I said, a very good cast. And again, the film was written and directed by Joel Coen. And the cinematography is by Bruno Del Bonel, which I'll be talking about more in detail. And the set design was by Leah Greenblatt. So one thing I want to get into before I get into the movie itself, the one thing I want to say about Shakespeare. So it's been a very long time since I've watched the Shakespeare adaptation. Like I said, I saw Much Ado About Nothing. And the thing I will say, which is great about this movie, I was concerned even before I watched it, because obviously, if you're not an aficionado of William Shakespeare, you don't read a lot of his plays, you're not exposed to that theater experience. So obviously, the beautiful language sometimes can be hard to understand, just, with iambic pentameter and the way that they speak it. And it can be daunting and intimidating if you're not familiar with his work, or reading his writings, or just are familiar with that world of writing and that style of speaking when these roles are acted out. One of the great things about this film is, I think it is not as daunting. I think that here's the way I put it for myself, and here's my honest assessment of it. So the first 10, it's kind of almost when you watch a movie with characters with dialects that are very heavy. They're still speaking English, but the dialect's heavy. But here, it's a matter of getting into the flow of what they're saying. And the visuals are so great in this movie. They'll help you along at the beginning to get into the story, and then once you're used to the language and how they're speaking it, it's not that big a deal. Like I said, of course, there'll be some phrases in and out that maybe are symbolic in a way that maybe you don't catch, but it's nothing that detracts from the plot of the film. Because at the end of the day, what's so great about Shakespeare and a lot of his plays is, take away the language and the I mean, not that the writing is not beautiful, but it's the stories are simple, and I mean that in the sense that it's telling a very straightforward story. And once you catch that main story, you're going to be fine. And when you watch this movie, you'll be fine. So like I said, within 10-15 minutes, you're good to go. The movie is an hour and 45 minutes, and let me tell you something. And this is always my barometer for my enjoyment of a movie. It went by quick. Like I said, I think another thing, if people are not used to Shakespeare, they may say, "Oh, this is going to seem long because I can't understand." This movie is lean, and it's taut, and it's great. And what makes it move quickly is, of course, the top rate acting from top to bottom is fantastic. And I'll get into, like I said, I'll get into the more of the cast, but I want to kind of get into the technical stuff. So the movie's shot in black and white. If you've seen any of the stills or any of the commercials, it's shot in beautiful black and white, which has become kind of a trend lately with movies, with Roma and Mank and pictures like that. They and it's beautifully used here. And the cinematography is, when I was watching it, it kind of reminded me of a couple of movies right off the top of my head. So like German Expressionist filmmaking, Fritz Lang, if you've seen M, and the other movie actually reminded me of a lot, which was ironic, was the Orson Welles film, The Trial, his adaptation of the Kafka book with Anthony Perkins, which is a very, with any of Orson Welles films, beautiful cinematography, kind of expressionistic looks of the film, and I kind of just remembered that too. And I know Orson Welles actually did a version of Macbeth in 1948. I haven't seen that Orson Welles film. I'm a huge fan of Welles, but that's one of the movies I have not seen. So after watching this one, I may go back and revisit, or at least watch that and maybe review that to compare and contrast to this version of Macbeth. But the cinematography is beautiful. There's, like I said, it was all shot. All of it was shot on sound stages, so none of it was shot outside. But they make it look like it was, but it gives it a certain kind of aesthetic that I think assists in the film. So it's beautiful to look at. The black and white photography is striking, and like I said, the acting is phenomenal. Denzel Washington always is fantastic. So him being great doesn't surprise me. And Frances McDormand is good as well. I think Denzel Washington is the stronger one of the two, but Frances McDormand acquits herself quite well, and I think she's great as well. Usually, when I do these reviews of the film, I always pick a performance. I'm going to hold off on that because there's so many good performances here. I'm going to kind of list them later. So if you've never read Macbeth and you don't know anything about the play, let me give you at least a synopsis of what the story is about. So Denzel Washington plays Macbeth, who is a warrior. As the movie opens, he has just come back from battle with his compatriot Banquo. They've successfully defeated an attack on Scotland, and the king gives them, his approval and saying how great they battled. Before he meets the king, though, Banquo and Macbeth are visited by three witches, and they're all played actually by the same actress, Catherine Hunter, who's phenomenal. The physical things that she does with the part, the voice inflection is fantastic. I've never seen her before. I looked her up. I think she was in one of the Harry Potter films, but I don't remember her. But she's fantastic as playing all three sisters or witches in this film. And they prophesy to Macbeth that he's going to become the king of Scotland. So he comes back. The king, says, you did a great job. Thank you for fighting this great battle. So, of course, Macbeth is thinking some things are going to happen. And in that meeting with the king and with Banquo there, the king announces that his son, Malcolm, will be the heir to the throne. So, of course, this sets Macbeth into a fit of anger, and he goes back to see his wife and tells her what happened, what's going on. So his wife, Lady Macbeth, concocts a plan for Macbeth to kill the king so he can assume the throne. So, of course, Macbeth is like, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm doing that. So she basically questions his manhood and says, are you not man enough to do this? Do you want to be the king or not? So he commits to killing the king. He does so. He murders him while the king is staying at his house. And then, of course, that sets the movie in motion. Now, when the three witches visit Macbeth and Banquo, there were two predictions that they actually made. One, that Macbeth would become king. But to Banquo, they also told him that he would never become king, but he would be the father to a line of kings that would succeed him. So now he would not be king, but his children, grandchildren will be a line of kings, which of course he listens to. Once Macbeth murders Duncan, and the investigation is trying to go underway, obviously they set it up where the two people that were attending to the king, Lady Macbeth frames them by putting the bloody daggers in the room, and to make it appear that they murdered Duncan. And then, of course, they are not dead. Macbeth slays them and then tells everyone, hey, I killed them because I was so angry that they killed the king. And then that's kind of how they try to knead it up. So Banquo is obviously suspicious. He's like, wait a minute, the witches told us one thing. And then what happens is, and this is where the story is very simple. It sets, like you see in a lot of these tragedies, it sets wheels in motion and things just progressively get worse. So as the movie progresses, Macbeth, it's the old cliche, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And as Macbeth assumes the throne, he realizes that he's got to continue to cover up what's happened. There's a break in Scotland. Some people are for Macbeth, some people are not. He becomes more paranoid. He gets to the point where he sends someone to kill Banquo because he knows that Banquo's kids will be king, and he sees that as a threat. And it's kind of a downward spiral, and that's really the essence of this movie, and that's what it's about. So you see the consequences of the decisions that he makes and how that destroys everything around him. So that's a pretty basic synopsis of it. So again, the movie moves very briskly. It's very well done. And like I said, myself going into it, like I said, I hadn't seen a Shakespeare adaptation in years. So you never know how it's going to go. And I didn't know the length of the film until I started it, because I didn't know, is this going to be, because obviously the trend with movies now is to be longer, with some notable exceptions. But it's something like this, with a play that you can edit in and around. I thought for sure it's going to be an over 2-hour movie. It's an hour and 45 minutes. And I think the decisions to make it that length is perfect. Like I said, the movie moves very quickly. And like I said, don't let the language intimidate you. Like I said, within 10 minutes, you're already going to get into the flow. And visually, the story is told so well that, like I said, I don't think it's going to be an impediment at all if you have any kind of misgivings about watching the film because of being Shakespearean language and how they speak. So I wouldn't even let that be a concern at all. But again, fantastic cast, of course, led by Denzel Washington. He's phenomenal as always. Like I said, Frances McDormand is good as well. I think of the two of them, I think his performance is a little bit stronger, but not to criticize Frances McDormand. I thought she was good. Now, again, picking a favorite performance is tough. I know I mentioned Stephen Root playing the porter. He's got a 5-minute scene. I don't even think it's that long, actually. I probably gave him too much credit, but it's just, he's fantastic because he's always great. But Bertie Carvel as Banquo is fantastic. You can see his conflicted, the conflict he has, because obviously he's very close to Macbeth, but is suspicious of what's happened after the king is murdered. Like I said, Henry Melling is Malcolm. He does a good job in the movie as well. As I mentioned previously, Catherine Hunter is fantastic as the three witches. Brendan Gleeson is King Duncan, he's a great actor. He's in it obviously for a very short time because he gets murdered early in the film. This is not a spoiler, obviously, if you know anything about the story. That's what sets everything in motion. Corey Hawkins, which I had seen, I know him from two things. He was in Straight Outta Compton. He played Dr. Dre, and I know him actually for the spinoff that lasted one season of 24, Legacy. He was the star of that. But I know he's a very very seasoned, trained theater actor. And like I said, the cast from top to bottom is fantastic. It's well acted. You know, when you have the prose, the Shakespearean story, you know, it's difficult, I think, for actors to do unless they're experienced Shakespearean actors. So to pull that off, I thought the cast was fantastic. There was nobody in the cast that I didn't think was fantastic. And like I said, what's really great about this movie and what really makes it move, I mean, I think it's very intentional that Joe Coen decided to call it The Tragedy of Macbeth, to put that entire title into the movie, because it's really descriptive of what the movie is. Because basically what happens is the initial murder just sets in motion just a series of tragedy after tragic event that just kind of spirals out of control to its inevitable conclusion. And like I said, it's well acted. I was riveted throughout. The cinematography, the set design, the sound, the music, the editing is all top notch. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend this film. And like I said, if you are a Shakespeare fan, I highly recommend it. I think you'll enjoy this adaptation. If you're not a Shakespeare fan, I recommend it as well. I think it's a good movie to watch if you haven't been exposed to Shakespeare at all, because this is like I said, this is a pretty exciting story and kind of, you know, palace intrigue. So like if you're a fan of, you know, I won't say I would say Game of Thrones, because people knows what that show is, but it's just, you know, palace intrigue really, but more of it is just a tale of when you make a bad decision, the ramifications of that decision, and the kind of the domino effect of what ends up happening, because you think you're getting something that you wanted and it ends up backfiring in all kinds of ways. So at the end of the day, that's what this movie is about, and it does a phenomenal job of doing it. Like I said, it flies by. The cast is fantastic. All the technical work on the movie is fantastic. And I think it's a brilliant, and I'll say the word debut for Joe Coen as a solo director. And I'm not surprised. Like I said, the Coen brothers are some of the most innovative, creative, quirky filmmakers that are around. So I definitely highly recommend The Tragedy of Macbeth. I am going to give it 4.5 Van Goghs out of 5. So on that scale, that's almost perfect. I think it's a phenomenal movie. It's a movie I would see again, and I highly recommend it. I think you will enjoy it very much. The movie is currently streaming on Apple Plus. It is playing in theaters now. I don't know how long that's going to be the case or how widespread it is, but if you do have Apple Plus, it's streaming there right now. That's where I saw it last night. So I definitely highly recommend The Tragedy of Macbeth. Again, that was written and directed by Joel Coen, and stars Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand, along with a fantastic cast of actors in this film. So again, The Tragedy of Macbeth, I am giving 4.5 Van Goghs out of 5. So my current episode that's up now is my review of the new Scream movie. So check that out. I enjoyed it very much. So check out my review there. Again, you can find this podcast wherever you get podcasting, wherever you get your podcast, whatever app you use. So again, the show is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Amazon Music, and Podbean. You can get it at any of those locations. Also, like I said, you can watch the video version of this podcast on the show's YouTube channel, which is Let Me Bend Your Ear Podcast. It's also available on the Facebook page, which is at Let Me Bend Your Ear. The show is also available on Twitter. My handle there is at Bend Your Ear Pod. The show, when it's live, if you happen to be live on Twitch, it's there as well, at Bend Your Ear Pod. And again, you can watch or listen to any of the episodes on the website. I direct you there for anything you need, especially if you want to download the episodes at your leisure, if you do not use a podcasting app. Again, that website is letmebendyour.ear.com. And if you want to email the show, if there's a movie you want me to review, if you want to talk movies, if you have a question or a comment, please go there. The email is bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. And again, the two things I would ask: if you are a new listener, welcome. And I hope you continue to listen. If you are a regular listener, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming back to continue to listen. So I do appreciate that. Every download that I get, I appreciate very much. And like I said, if you can do one of two things or both, if you listen on a podcasting app, if you can rate and review, hopefully you give it 5 stars. Like I said, the more ratings and reviews a show like this gets, the higher in search results the show will appear in if people are looking for a new movie podcast. And secondly, if you see me on social media, specifically on Twitter, at Bend Your Ear Pod. If you see me post, I'll always post when new episodes are up, or my video episode there. If you can like it and retweet it, share it with your friends, recommend this podcast if they're looking for a new movie podcast. Like I said, I'm looking to build and grow the show. So if you could do that, that would be fantastic. And again, I do my shows live. If you want to ever come on and you happen to be live when I'm on, just hit me up in the chat. Just say, hey, I want to come on. We'll put you on. Or if you want to type in a comment, I'll respond live as well. So again, this is the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. I am Frank, the host of the show. This is where I discuss movies new and old. I really appreciate everybody that's been listening. And I don't know what the next episode is going to be. I know for the last 2 episodes, I've said Defending Your Life, the Albert Brooks film. I'm eventually going to get to it, but there's other movies that have been popping up. So like Tragedy of Macbeth was available. So I'm like, let me check this out because I was really excited to see it because I am a huge Denzel Washington fan. So I was happy to do that instead. So we will eventually get to Defending Your Life and review that because I'm looking forward to it. That'll be a rewatch for me. I saw it in the movies, but I got it on Criterion, so I want to watch it, and then I'll review it for the podcast. So again, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope everybody has a fantastic week, and I'll be back soon with another new episode. Take care. Have a fantastic week.